Hello everyone, my name is Voya and welcome to my deep guide. Today we're going to take an in-depth comparison look between two direct competitors, the Ratta Supernote A6 and the Onyx Boox Nova 2. So let's see how they stack up against each other. Here they both are. We have Ratta Supernote A6 on the left and we have the Boox Nova 2 on the right. And right off the bat we can see that they are similarly sized, but there are some noticeable differences in the design overall. Nova 2, because of the outlines, it's a little bit taller on the top, but the width itself is more or less identical. As far as the thickness goes, because of the slanted edges, the perceived thickness of the Nova 2, it's gonna look slimmer than the more block-like design of the Supernote, but in reality when you put them side to side, you will see that there's actually nothing between them. As far as the weight goes, Supernote is 245 grams, Nova 2 is 265 grams, so 20 grams difference, but in reality the feeling of weight in hand is pretty much exactly the same. On the back we have the regular kind of plastic on the Nova 2, and we have a nicely designed kind of approach on the Supernote. As far as the buttons and everything goes, both have a USB-C on the bottom, both have a button, power and standby button on top. Ratta doesn't have anything in the middle because it has that super awesome slider which works for the menu and refresh, while Boox has a back or home button. On physical appearance and specifications, there's really nothing to differentiate one from the other. Build quality wise, well, Nova has a glass screen on top and obviously a very nice, I think this is a metal frame. It does feel like it actually to have a metal frame around it. The end result is that it's super rigid and it feels a little bit better as far as the build quality goes. Ratta is well built, but that bend is present, and on this unit I do have that issue that I mentioned, that the bottom of the screen protector keeps wanting to unglue a little bit. Now after almost a month it hasn't unglued any further, but the same thing is present. So as far as the build quality goes, I think that the advantage has to go to Nova 2. As far as the overall physical specifications and just the design itself, my personal preference goes towards Supernote, simply because of two main things. First of all, it's a bit of a special experience. It's not just another tablet, which is definitely the case with the Nova 2. That's nothing bad with that. It's just simply looks like any other tablet, down to the rounded edges and all these kinds of things. This one, on the other hand, is a bit of a different and more special experience, but the main advantage for me as far as the design goes is this slider on the side, which really works very, very well. As far as the design itself goes, for me, a slight advantage goes to the Supernote. As far as the specifications go, well, let's just stick to the basics and then you'll see that it's a complete walkover and a no-brainer as far as Nova 2 goes. So Supernote has a single core 1 GHz CPU, Nova has an octa-core 2 GHz CPU. Supernote has 1 GB of RAM, Nova 2 has 3 GB of RAM. They both have exactly the same 32 gigs of storage, non-expandable. Slightly smaller battery on the Supernote at 2500 milliamps versus 3150 on the Nova 2. They both have a USB-C port, but that's about it. Then Nova actually continues going on. It has a front light, it has a glass display, it has a microphone, it has Bluetooth capability, it has both 2.4 and 5G Wi-Fi capability, and much more. Nova 2 has everything you would expect from an Android 9 device, naturally, because it's running on Android 9. The Supernote kind of belongs to this other family of devices, which is taking a more minimalist approach by doing their own Linux version of the OS and extracting as much as they can from the provided hardware. On paper, Nova 2 should be a complete monster dominance walkover over the Supernote A6, but it remains to be seen how does that actually fare in real life. As far as the screen goes, they are technically the same size, same resolution, and same pixel per inch density, so no real image quality differences there, but there are some technological implementation differences that are actually relevant. Two are most notable, and they are, I guess, in favor of Nova 2. Front light is something that Nova 2 has. Supernote doesn't have a front light. I like my e-readers to not have a light, and I use the other type of light because for me the whole point is not to have screen glaring at me. However, I completely understand that for probably the majority of people this is going to be a big advantage. But the main functionality difference, and that is an obvious advantage for Nova 2, is the different refresh modes for the screens. So Nova 2 has those 4 refresh screen modes. X mode is meh, but all 3 are very usable, and what that actually means is that while I'm using the same document in Nova 2, I could simply go to scroll while in speed mode, while I'm not able to do that on the Supernote itself. On the Supernote, I have to switch from page to page. Now, as far as the performance of the screen goes, more on that later when we compare the actual real-world performance. And here's a shot for anyone interested, a comparison of plain white paper, printer paper, versus the white on the screens of either of the devices. I think this is an entirely personal preference type of thing, but it's a good thing to have actual measurable reference here. As far as the pens go, there's an obvious advantage build quality wise for the Supernote, but on the other hand, the Nova 2 pen, while certainly a lot cheaper and flimsier and everything else when compared to the Heart of Metal pen, it does have an eraser in the end, and it does have a button that will double as a eraser so that you don't have to flip the pen itself. That being said, you will notice that I've replaced the nib and I've placed the remarkable nib on top. The reason behind it is that the chip quality is simply too low to normally use. I mean, you constantly actually feel it, and there is a problem of it being built in a very flimsy way, and the way I write and the way I hold the pen, it bends and it feels like it's gonna actually break. That's certainly not the case with the Heart of Metal or the standard pen that comes with the Supernote. However, you do not have the eraser functionality, you do not have the button. And the question is that, yeah, you have to replace these probably after 6 to 8 months or something like that, which again should be much better than the nib replacements on the Onyx Boox. However, it entirely depends on which nibs you use and how you actually write. That's a very big difference, but the overall feel and quality and how they work, absolutely the Supernote pen wins all over. Can you swap the pens? Yes, you can, but the Supernote pen doesn't register as pressure sensitivity on the Nova 2 for some reason. Battery life is exceptional on both devices, absolutely, and you will get easily 2 weeks or more out of either of the devices with normal use. That being said, higher capacity on the Nova 2 I think will result obviously in better performance, and from what I've seen so far, it does seem to reflect in real world. So slight advantage does go to the Nova 2 as far as the battery life goes. Now, as far as the covers go, you probably have several other alternatives for the Onyx Boox, but I'm going with the most often purchased ones. With the Supernote Ratta, you have the Folio, which is really beautiful and extremely practical, and it works really well. I love the fact that it fits the device very nicely, and it looks beautiful as an overall package, and it gives you again this tactile and slightly different type of feel, because it feels like a very nice notebook. You open it up and then you write. So overall, it's a very nice experience. Onyx Boox cover, this is a Nova Nova cover that's compatible with Nova and Nova 2. It's also extremely well built, really well designed, and it looks very pretty. There are two things that for me personally, it's like the initial fit was extremely tight, so it takes a couple of days for the cover to actually stretch and fit into the Nova 2 so that it actually fits properly. Once it does, everything is fine. If this area here was a little bit larger, then it would give a bit more give here so that you don't have this kind of thing. But with the weight of the device, it's certainly going to press it and it's going to be fine. It's just something that's a little bit better on the Supernote because it allows for the full flip over without any pressure and resistance. That being said, the quality itself, because it has this type of protective layer or whatever it is on top, and it just is a little bit thicker, this Onyx cover does feel a little bit more robust, and it does feel like it will protect your device better, especially because it encases the device from all sides, which is certainly not the case with the flip book type of case naturally, because it just flips around. As far as the aesthetics go, I think the advantage would go to Supernote 2 because it's like just more pretty and all that kind of stuff. As far as practicality goes, it goes for the Onyx Boox, simply because it's more robust and it feels like it's going to protect your device in a better way. As far as the reader capabilities and the overall reader experience goes, they can compare up to a point, but overall I think Nova 2 takes the cake, simply because of Android environment and because of the monstrosity of hardware specifications that it has inside. It is able to perform and do things that Supernote simply can't. First of all, it supports a little bit more formats than the Supernote does. The features of reformatting, reflowing your PDFs, zooming, and all of these kinds of things are far more dominant on the Nova 2. Both are of the same small format, and I think that these features become tremendously important on a smaller format like the A6 format that we have in both of these devices. So for example, I have the same exact document opened on both of the devices, same page, and as you can see, this is one of those problematic PDF documents that I talked about that I usually use, which is really tiny and all that kind of stuff. So on Supernote, I am able to just use the fit, so I can just now confirm, and that's going to zoom it in a little bit and it's going to look better, but that's pretty much it as far as I can go. If I wanted to zoom in a little bit more, I certainly can crop it, like I can trim it, right? And then I can confirm. But the problem is, even when it processes, now I see everything properly, right? But when I flip, it's flipping a page, and I don't have an option of scrolling through the page or anything like that. So I can't, realistically, I can't read the page at this zoomed in level. So in reality, the option that I can use on the Supernote is this best fit option that it gives me. And while that certainly is good and it works and it helps, on the Nova 2 you can actually take that concept and expand it a lot further, and I can just use my favorite mode, which is the navigation, and I can just simply divide the document into 4 panels, and I just go OK, and now I have the same exact document here, and not only can I zoom in and move around, I can also simply tap on the sides and switch from panel to panel. So that means that I can really navigate properly between all of these kinds of things, and I also have the freedom to simply navigate the page however I want it. So it's a very, very good way of handling things. And it allows me to actually read through the document in this way. As far as the table of contents functionalities go, they're quite similar, and with the latest update on the Supernote you have very similar type of look on both of them. I just wish it was a little bit more squashed. There's no need for so much space between the text and the lines. I mean, it's just much better to have it organized like this, especially in a smaller format, but it's definitely getting there. Then we can also use the same thing. You can actually go through bookmarks, which is the exact same thing that we can use here, with the exception that on the Nova 2 we are able to rename our bookmarks. On Supernote you can't. And finally, you are able to actually look through your annotations on both. I didn't add any annotations here, but the only difference is that on Supernote they're located outside in the summary thing. So for example, if I went in here, then I could see the listing of my annotations, and they're nicely organized. On Nova 2, I can jump to my annotations within the table of contents within the document itself, which is really nice. But most importantly, again, are the options, and I am able to modify them, and most importantly, I'm able to export my annotations as a text file, which is certainly a plus for Nova 2. Nova 2 can also show you the pages where you've written something down or scribbled. That's not an option that's present at the moment on the Supernote itself. Now, these are the things that definitely should be possible to implement, especially exporting of annotations and searching the scribbles in the Supernote. However, at the moment of doing this review, they are not present, so I report what I see. It doesn't really stop there because, for example, on the Nova 2, the dictionary is there, the highlighting options are customizable, you can redact things, and you can do a translation web search. It can speak, while of course Supernote can't do that because it doesn't have any of those applications. And basically at this point the reader experience of Nova 2 keeps going on, and it just feels like a more modern device, which in reality it is. It is the first device of 2020. Experience of all of the previous books models, families, because there's many of them, it actually shows, and Nova 2 really condenses all of that experience in a very, very balanced and powerful package. Without going too much into details, definitely up to a point they are kind of competing, and Supernote is able to definitely kind of keep up, but after a certain point then certainly Nova 2 kind of comes out as the dominant one. So overall reader experience and features, definitely the plus goes to the Nova 2. So let's now talk about the writing experience and the overall note-taking capabilities of both devices. Here they are fairly similar, but one of the obvious differences and concerns is going to be the glass screen versus the screen protector that Supernote has. And for example, I can take and use the same exact pen on both of the devices, which is a really good thing. So if I write here with the same pen and I continue writing here, the obvious difference that I feel is the hardness. And that is one of the advantages of the Supernote's dedicated screen protector. And there's no mistaking the feel. I mean, glass is always going to feel harder than the protector, and that's pretty much it. There's nothing you can do about that unless you have a very flexible and kind of squidgy nib, but then that nib is gonna drag and it's not gonna work. So we're using a really good nib, which is a remarkable nib, on the same exact pen on the both devices, and I have to say that the overall writing experience is more pleasant on the Supernote. You definitely do feel that difference of the softness. It's a little bit more comfortable, and when I transfer immediately from the Supernote to the Note 2, the thing that hits me the hardest is the rigidity and the hardness of the glass surface. And there's nothing they can do. So probably a dedicated screen protector might improve that, but I really don't like the feel of the default screen protector. It's draggy, it's squidgy, and it's rubbery, and it just does not feel well. So I would rather use this directly on the glass than use the dedicated screen protector. Maybe it's possible to find a custom screen protector that actually will improve this experience, but as it is now, a slight advantage in writing experience definitely goes to the Supernote, and it's actually something that you can feel. Now let's test how quickly the lines are drawn on both of them. And this is a test in development. A couple of words about the speed test. This is a new thing that I'm still developing and investigating and kind of improving. So it's a work in progress, and this is the first time I'm actually attempting it. The test consists out of high lit conditions, shooting at 480 frames per second and drawing a line at roughly the same speed. What does the test measure? Well, the test measures the time it takes for the drawn stroke to catch up to the virtual marker point that the tip of the pen passed. So basically, if you have a virtual marker point, the tip of the pen will pass it, and then we start measuring the time until the actual drawn stroke reaches that marker. The point of the test is to quantify the feeling that we keep talking about, because I think it's quite important to have something that's measurable. I don't feel comfortable simply relying on the feeling itself. I like to understand these feelings. Why does a certain device feel better than the other one, etc., etc. So this is one of the most obvious things that I am able to actually do. There are many other elements that will contribute to the feeling, but this is the one that I can measure. So let's start there. Baseline has been established by repeating the same conditions and same tests several times and doing the same measurement several times and seeing what the margin of error is, and it's actually quite marginal, so to speak. Test results seem fairly consistent at this first initial try, and hopefully they will improve over time. The test seems to confirm the feeling that I had, that Ratta feels better, that the writing experience is more responsive and better, and it actually is quite nice to quantify that and to see it in action. Now, the interesting part that I was not actually expecting was that there's this new element that is shown when you shoot the footage at 480 frames per second, and that's that there's like this drawing, multiple layer drawing type of thing going on. So the drawn line first catches up in a very faint way to the marker that we're talking about, and then the line keeps being filled in, so to speak. So I'm measuring two distinct times in this benchmark, and I'm calling them the first touch, and that's the first moment when the faintest inkling of the drawn stroke appears at or around the marker point. And then we have the second one, which is the full line, and that's basically measuring when the stroke around the marker has been filled up to be completely black. So those are the two different numbers, and I found the results of the test really interesting. Not only did the test confirm the subjective feeling that Ratta is faster, more responsive and better, but it actually measured it in a very nice way. Ratta is 25% faster than the Nova 2. So your writing experience is 25% faster and more responsive than on the Nova 2. Now that's actually something that needs to be taken into consideration depending on your priorities. But what I found even more interesting are the results regarding the Nova 2 and the different refresh modes. Standard mode is the fastest one for writing, and the faster modes, faster you get, slower the written strokes are. Go figure. So I hope somebody can actually give me an explanation about that in the comments. This is certainly something new that I just experienced, and I'm going to be doing some research about it because I'm really interested in it. But the results of the tests are: Supernote A6 is 25% faster than the Nova 2 at writing speeds, and if you're writing on the Nova 2, your fastest refresh mode is the standard mode. So, interesting test. As far as the actual notebook capabilities go, They're very similarly matched, but again, slight advantage will go to the Nova 2. It's both the functionality and responsiveness. So for example, changing the template on a Nova 2 goes very quickly. Everything else on Supernote, you can simply see that it's a little bit more sluggish and takes a little bit more time, which is to be expected simply because it has a single core 1 GHz CPU and this guy has 8 cores of 2 GHz. So obviously this is going to be something that Nova 2 is always going to be better at. But speed aside, the functionalities are also a little bit more balanced and a little bit more powerful on the Nova 2. So for example, the color selection, we can just choose these colors here, but we have an obvious problem of not being able to layer the colors, and the colors are basically, I've been thinking about this and it looks like it's the way Supernote is doing it is transparency. So what it's doing is probably 50% transparency and 25% transparency, and if that was the case, then you would see this issue of darkest color presumably being on top. So I assume that's what's going on, and that's something that definitely has to be changed, which is certainly not the behavior that you have on the Onyx Boox. On the Onyx Boox you can normally draw like this, and then I can take a light gray and I can just draw on top, which is the proper and expected behavior of a notebook. Furthermore, as far as colors go, there's a far bigger range of colors, and not only that, we also have the white color, the red, green and blue on the Note, which is something that it's not present on the Supernote. The brush sizes are a little bit more flexible. As far as the brushes themselves go, actually Supernote has a highlighter, which is something that's quite useful. So it has a bit of an advantage there as far as the brushes go. But then we actually get to other features such as text box, the lasso tool, the selection tool, which actually supports the ability of not only moving and rotating, but you can also scale, non-uniform, uniform. You can copy the selection, you can paste it in the same document, in other documents and all that kind of stuff. In the Ratta, that's not the case. In the Ratta you can simply select and then you can move it about. You can make a copy, but the copy is basically just a duplicate. There is no real buffer. So I can't just go back to this page and then say, here we go, I want to paste it somehow. I don't know how. there is no option of pasting the selection from the other side, which is certainly the case that you can do on Nova 2, and not within only the same notebook, but also within different notebooks. So obviously advantage goes there. And while I'm at it, at the text recognition, at this stage there's no point even comparing the two, because Supernote, while it does have that smart document dedicated type of functionality, it just is not that usable for English, at least. While the Nova 2 has the ability not only to search your pages, but also to search through your notebooks for a specific word. So your handwritten notes are actually searchable, which is a gigantic thing. As far as text recognition goes, there's not even a competition. Nova 2 completely dominates. And you also have some other options here, inserting an image and all of that kind of stuff. So overall, again, I think that the Nova 2 definitely has more capabilities and a bit of a better performance as well. Now let's test real-world performance. So on paper, definitely Nova 2 should dominate Supernote in every single area and respect. Now let's see if that's actually the case. Let's power them both up and see the boot up time. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay. And let's align here and see. It should be a close call, I think, but then again, Nova 2 is starting up the whole Android and all sorts of things, so it might actually take longer. We'll see. Yep, Supernote is up and Nova 2 is up as well. So a slight advantage in the boot up time definitely goes to the Supernote. As it's becoming a tradition now, let's use the dreaded Hercules DJ controller document with the awful front page that has gazillion gigabytes of unnecessary data. Let's try and load up the first page for the very first time and see how long it takes to load up. So 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, they both loaded this up. Let's try and load up the first page. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, loading, and I think he's loading as well. So let's see how long it takes. It should be a complete walkover. Yeah, and Nova 2 loaded it up. We're still waiting for Supernote. And this is where the octa-core CPU simply kind of dominates. So let's try just basic page flipping on both. Nova 2 is in normal mode, refresh mode first, and then we'll flip over to see what kind of speed differences we get. So let's try single page flip. It's fairly similar either direction. Let's try 1, 2, 3. Oh, actually, Supernote was a smidge faster. So 1, 2, 3. This one was a little bit delayed. All right, and now let's flip back so that we see how both devices perform when loading that huge image. Actually, Supernote kept it in RAM and doesn't really care, while the Nova 2 certainly does care. So look at this. This is actually quite interesting. We got only 1 GB of RAM on the Supernote, but the end result is that you will effectively have to wait for the Nova 2 to load it every time, even though this is just the next page. That's quite an interesting thing to see. So now let's load up a different type of document, and loading speeds are, well, definitely faster on the Nova 2. Let's just get to the same page so that we can navigate, but then again we have some annotations here, so it's not going to be exactly the same, but let's just see. So 1, 2, 3. We are both on the same page, but evidently Nova 2 takes the cake and it's faster as expected. But Supernote doesn't lag too behind. It is definitely slower. However, when things really take a turn is when we switch the Nova 2 refresh mode to speed mode. So once I switch to speed mode, now we're actually in a very, very different category, and I can just kind of it's very, very different. So the ghosting, while it's a little bit present, the speed mode, which is most definitely there for quickly thumbing through your documents, is something where, again, Nova 2 just pops out. So Supernote is given an admirable fight, and in some cases it's definitely keeping up and maybe even overtaking Nova 2 a little bit, but as soon as we switch over to the speed mode, then Nova simply takes off. So that's an expected result, but very, very decent performance from the Supernote as well. I have to actually say that I'm surprised. I was expecting that it's going to be far slower when compared to the Nova 2. I was unable to perform the giant notebook test that I do like to do, simply because there is no copy page functionality in Nova 2. So I can't simply select a single page or multiple pages and then just copy them within the same notebook. So that's a surprising oversight. So let's flip between pages of a notebook, and Nova is now in normal mode. Okay, well, feels hit and miss. Sometimes Supernote's faster, sometimes Nova 2 is faster, and obviously that's gonna have an impact. It will probably depend on how many notes what you have written on a page, most likely, because it just depends on what type of drawings are there, but most definitely in the same ballpark. So I don't really see any big noticeable difference in flipping the pages, for example. As far as drawing and writing experience, that's something we talked about. So performance wise, surprisingly, not much difference between them. As far as customizability goes, you can equally easily add different screensavers and all that kind of stuff, but slight advantage again will go to the Nova 2, simply because you can add, for example, 3 screensavers and the powered down graphics, while you can only add a screensaver here at a time. Of course, you can easily switch between them, but that's that. However, when the customizability overall goes, then the navigation ball simply takes it to another level, and you are able to customize your experience completely, and you are able to customize your tools here, and also within the notebook itself you are able to customize your toolbar so that it contains only the tools that you want, the way you want them. Granted, a similar type of customizability is allowed here, but at the moment it's only kind of restricted to smart writing, the way you want to have smart writing or not, but that's pretty much it. So as far as customizability go, I think Nova 2 also takes the cake there. Now, as far as the other specifics of the devices go, Supernote definitely has this slider going for it, but then the nature of the Android 9 power device takes over and becomes a little bit more dominant, because not only can you do email as you can do on the Note 2, but you can do it in the email app that you want. You can browse the internet, you can actually watch YouTube videos, you can listen to music, you can use Spotify, it can read books to you, it can take text input, so you can dictate to it because it has a microphone, and on and on and on and on. I mean, there's simply too much to actually start going through it. And hardware wise, you have the USB OTG support, Bluetooth, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely Nova 2. This comparison video is the first one where I'm gonna start utilizing testing standardization and some benchmark categories. The reason behind it is testing standardization and the ability to compare the devices on a more comprehensive basis. And not only the devices that are being compared here in this video, but devices that are being compared in future videos, so that we can actually come back to the scoring system and see how they fare against each other. And that's something that I'm probably going to be posting up on the website as well, so that we have like a long-standing type of score thing for past devices and for the future devices as well. So it's something that you can actually just pop by and see how devices stack up in all of these categories. Now, the categories I've actually added are numerous. There's like 15 or 16 categories, which is a lot. The reason behind it is to actually be able to get an informed decision, because the numbers are not everything. It depends what you want to use the device for. Maybe you don't care about the results about one category, but really care about the results of the other category, etc., etc. I think that the global results are very useful, but they don't tell the entire picture. So that's the result behind this really comprehensive categorization of the tests. Every device tested will have scores in each of the categories, and then finally those are summed up into the final score. Scoring is from 0 to 10, but it's not all about numbers. It's more about getting an informed understanding of the capabilities, strengths, and weaknesses of each of the devices tested here. So let's put this new standardization to the test and sum up the results between the Supernote A6 and the Nova 2. Globally, Nova 2 scored higher than the Supernote A6, which makes sense. So, and it's a significant difference between the two. Nova 2 is 8.34 and Supernote is, I think, 7.06 or something like that. Nova 2 has more features, more flexibility, better performance for almost the same price. And generally speaking, if you're looking at an overall device, Nova 2 is a better choice. However, we shouldn't really put a stop to the story there because, as I said, it's not all about numbers. I think it's important to put things into context. For example, Supernote A6 has a faster screen, better writing experience, and a much superior pen that comes with it. Another consideration are the constant updates, which will affect the overall score of the device, and that's something that I will be updating after each of the updates for the device itself. For example, if you wanted to match the writing experience of Supernote A6 on a Nova 2 device, you would have to spend additional money on maybe a high-class screen protector that could offer slightly softer feedback, or a much more expensive and much higher class pen that could maybe try and use the dampening features and all that kind of stuff to maybe soften the experience and make it a little bit better. And that's an additional expense, which probably would amount to $50 or maybe even $75. And that's something that needs to be taken into account, I think. However, even with the better pen and better screen protector, you will never get a faster display. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind if the writing experience and writing speed is what you are looking for. Now, please take into consideration that these are really small differences, but you do feel them. They are something that you can feel. By no means is writing on Nova 2 bad in any way or anything like that. When compared to the Supernote A6 writing experience, it's 25% slower and it is noticeably harder and a little bit less comfortable to write on. Now that doesn't bother me, for example, but I do always feel the difference when I go back and start sketching and writing on the Supernote A6. However, the price is the determining factor for me here, and Supernote currently goes with the normal pen and the flip book that you saw me showing at $370, and Nova 2 is $340 plus another $40 on top for the flip book cover, so $380. So there's a $10 difference between the two devices. Now, if you add on top the cost of maybe $50 to $75 of screen protector and another pen for the Nova 2, then that raises to $85 difference between the two, and then that's something actually that needs to be taken into consideration. However, the default pen on Nova 2 is perfectly adequate and it works perfectly fine if the writing experience is not your priority. And I think that Supernote A6, with those certain advantages, there's definitely a spot for it in the e-ink writer and reader marketplace. However, the price is a little bit too high compared to the Nova 2. So what's the overall conclusion of this comparison video? Well, I think that without a doubt, Nova 2 is a better overall performer device and a much better value for money. However, if you're not looking for all of the bells and whistles and the functionalities of the Nova 2, and what you're actually looking for is a focus on better, faster writing experience with some decent reader capabilities, then Supernote A6 makes a lot of sense to actually consider. But generally speaking, as an overall device in this comparison, Nova 2 comes out as the winner. I hope you liked the video. Please let me know what you think about the benchmarks and the test results and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting to actually hear the feedback from you and see what can be implemented in what way and how I can improve the content of these tests and videos and reviews further. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe and check out the links for the Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. It really does help to expand the My Deep Guide experience because it's something that I think can be quite exciting. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye!